Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news is going to work in the future. I'm thrilled this week to talk to Dan Goikhman of Dappier. So, what's Dappier? Well, if you're a publisher and you're interested in making a deal with, say, OpenAI, and they won't answer your emails, well, that's where Dappier comes in. Dappier is one of several startups that are creating the new economy for content by building a bridge between publishers and what Dappier calls the AI internet. Basically, they'll ingest your content, make it compatible with AI engines like Perplexity and ChatGPT, and then give those AI companies a means to pay for it, or they get blocked. So you might say Dappier is a content broker, but it's really more than that. It doesn't just provide a way for AI companies to buy content in a legit way, it also empowers the publisher to leverage those same AI tools on their own sites. Because once you've processed data for AI chatbots, that also preps it for one of your own. The beauty of all this is that it's scalable and it provides a one stop shop for publishers looking for a comprehensive AI component to their content strategy. Dan and I talked about why there's a demand for Dappier and its brethren, how the technology works, and also whether or not chat will be the dominant way people get information in the future. You're going to want to listen to the end where we explore what the implications of all this is and how media companies should even think about themselves and the business they're in once AI is everywhere. As always, if you do enjoy the podcast, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague, and I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. I'd also really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app you're in. Those really do help the show get in front of more people. Lastly, you can check out everything we offer, including AI training classes for media, marketing, and PR professionals at mediacopilot.ai. Alrighty, let's jump into my conversation with Dan Goikhman of Dappier right after a word from our sponsor. Do you ever feel like you're wasting time sifting through endless stock photos, trying to find the one that fits the vibe you're looking for? Well, Adobe's got you covered. With new AI features in Adobe Stock, creators and media pros just like you can now zero in on exactly what you're looking for. Thanks to Adobe Firefly, you can use the power of generative AI to customize stock images before you even click purchase. Here's how it works. Do you like the subject of an image but not the background? Just click to swap or remove it completely. Got an oddly specific aspect ratio? Expand images to fit perfectly, no cropping required. Want to stay on brand? Generate variations of your image that match your brand's style. All of this is as easy as typing in a prompt and letting AI work its magic. The result is stunning, unique, professional quality visuals in seconds. Oh, and here's the kicker. When AI-generated content is inspired by Adobe Stock contributors, they get paid. It's a win-win for creatives everywhere. So say goodbye to creative blockers and hello to a smarter workflow with Adobe Stock. Head to adobe.com to see it in action. Dan, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Oh, thanks very much. Looking forward to being here.
Awesome. So Dappier. Dappier, according to its website, wants to help publishers monetize their content across the AI internet. First of all, I like the term of the AI internet. That's great. It all sounds great. But tell me, well, obviously I want to know exactly what Dappier does, because everyone likes to monetize and everyone wants to cut to that part. But I want to know exactly what you do. And also, more importantly, I think set it up so that you tell me, why is Dappier needed right now at this moment in the internet or the AI internet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when we started Dappier, which is about 18 months ago, right? We saw, obviously like, 100 million other people, the emergence of ChatGPT, and how users were enjoying this kind of interaction with content where, you ask a question, you get a summary or you get an answer. And in some cases, a summary. And at the time that came out, right, it was kind of like thinking, well, this content's got to be coming from somewhere. And in some cases, and in a lot of cases, that content was coming from leading internet publishers and sites on the web. when we started leaning into the business, we kind of played it forward a little bit and said, well, if 100 million people really like this kind of interaction, it's likely to make its way into other core consumer platforms. And sure enough, kind of 18 months later, right? Google, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Amazon, all of these core consumer platforms have AI assistant, sometimes at the post level, sometimes every few posts, you'll see a little suggested AI engagement, regardless of how it makes its way to you. And our thinking was that if that was going to happen everywhere, and especially across core consumer platforms, that this was going to become really problematic for, what we classify as data and information providers, right?
Right.
Um, so without attribution and without a clear business model in place for these folks to kind of get compensated for their content, this problem is only going to get exacerbated. And I think we've seen a lot of evidence of how rocky that road has been over the last, 18 to 24 months.
Cool. So, like, obviously, this is a big issue with regard to AI platforms and the fundamental issue of the content that fuels them and what the economy of that looks like. And I do want to get into sort of the big picture questions around all that, but I first want to sort of zero in on exactly like the component that Dappier plays and how it does it.
Yeah.
Right. So you have essentially a platform that is going to allow those information providers to, I guess, how would you describe it? I'd almost describe it as like make their content or data compatible with some kind of emerging AI economy, which
Yep.
honestly places like Dappier and others are creating.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm glad you glad you like that my description. But I'd like to know a little more, like exactly how does it do that? How what are you doing on a certain level?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we think about, kind of our initial kind of customer base, and where we're focused is media publishers, right? And media publishers have a well established, call it revenue supply chain on their owned and operated sites and apps. And our goal with Dappier was to provide a full stack solution that kind of solved for two things. One, made it easy for media companies to adopt AI tooling on their owned and operated sites and apps where they control the audience. And like if you think about, emerging AI platforms, obviously, you have ChatGPT, which is great and big. We have Perplexity, which is a great product that's scaling and growing quickly. Then you have lots and lots of other AI platforms emerging, but the open web is a really big place. And so we wanted to make it possible for publishers to easily adopt AI forward experiences on their owned and operated sites and apps, whether that be chatbots or answer engines, and kind of make it super simple to add those kinds of experiences without having to have significant infrastructure and upfront costs. In
Hmm.
order to accomplish that, we make it simple for publishers to build what are called RAG models, essentially that allow folks to interact with content in plain language and what's used to insert dynamic data into an AI engine. So we ingest our partners' content, we provide a RAG model to that content so that anyone can talk to it in plain language. And we provide a set of tools that they can leverage on their owned and operated sites, but that are consumer facing and monetizable as a kind of a first stop. And I think that separates us from a lot of the other folks that are thinking about this space, is providing the tooling for the existing revenue stack. And then
Hmm.
we put that same RAG model into a marketplace where it can be discovered by AI apps, individual developers, leveraged by foundational models. And so our idea essentially is to provide the infrastructure to host RAG on behalf of media companies, and then kind of provide the tentacles with which it can be distributed and monetized across the open web and what we refer to, as you noticed on our site, as the AI internet.
Yeah. So that makes a ton of sense. And I'd like to sort of break it down a little bit, sort of into a couple of components. Like one is that, so I'm a publisher, and I'm
Mhm.
like, people are, AI companies are harvesting my content, and I can do some stuff with robots.txt to sort of signal to crawlers or whatever, but that is, not a guaranteed system. There's obviously no built-in monetization there. And I don't want the future to leave me behind either, right? Even though like I don't like people harvesting my content, you also have to acknowledge a lot of people, to your point, really are liking this new kind of interaction. It might not be the dominant thing, but it's going to be a significant thing
Hmm.
in the future. So you are one like coming in, okay, so first, um, we're going to block and ensure that no one can do that, but we're going to ingest your content in our system so
Hmm.
that you can then market it, essentially sell it, and build all the infrastructure there so someone doesn't really have to do all of that hard work of figuring it out themselves. And that seems obviously very attractive. But one question I would have is like, so I don't want people harvesting my content, but you're going to harvest it. Like, I know it's for, to do it for them on their behalf and market it on their behalf. But I guess what would you say to someone who's like just super suspicious of AI in general and is like, wait a minute, what guarantee do I have that you're not doing something weird with it?
Yeah.
And then, well, then I have another question, but go on. First of
Yeah.
all,
I mean, I
that
think.
whole trust issue, which seems to be very strained between tech and AI right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the wording, that we kind of, and some of the positioning we've leaned to around this, that's resonated well to help kind of get folks over that hump is like, look, we aim to be kind of the iTunes solution to a Napster problem, right? Essentially, we want to provide the
Nice.
guardrails to allow folks to be good actors, and I think there's multiple ways to handle that. One, obviously, you know contractually, right? Essentially, we kind of are not looking to um, ingest content and provide it for training data into an AI. Actually, what we're doing by hosting RAG models on behalf of the customers is we are indexing the content, putting it into a format that can be leveraged by AI platforms. We're not actually sharing it back to the AI platforms, which is a
Mhm.
fundamental difference. It's being if you were a media company or any company that was building a RAG model to your data, you have to build all this infrastructure to host it and put it into an environment that it can be accessed by third parties. We're
Mhm.
providing that hosting environment. We're not actually taking the data and sharing it to AIs like with that, where they then take and do whatever they want with it. We have a very kind of structured way that we respond to AI platforms and what I would call like a multi-tenant siloed environment where content is stored on behalf of the customers.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a really good distinction. So it's not like it's a red light, green, just a simple red light, green light for a crawler, whoever's crawler it is. There is a certain amount of, I guess, proprietary rag that you're putting on it so
Correct.
that not only do you maintain control, but I would imagine a certain integrity to the information being presented, right?
Exactly. And there's an abstraction, right? And look, I think we are largely focused on um, helping publishers find a sustainable business model for their content at the time of inference, as
Mhm.
opposed to simply saying wholesale, go, kind of, it's okay, go ahead and crawl my content for your training data purposes. And I think that's really a fundamental difference to our approach. We really think about this new wave and new consumer experience as the next phase of content syndication. And I think
Mm.
that's an important way to think about it and help our customers think about it, right? Is like, this is another great new place for your content to be enjoyed, and you want to be well positioned to take advantage of the distribution rails that are emerging around you. So I
Yeah.
think it's a fundamentally different approach. Um,
Yeah, and I think, I wanted to get into sort of some big picture issues at
mhm.
some point, but I think what you're touching on is a good um, counter argument to, and you tell me if this is a good interpretation, but the thing that a lot of AI proponents, and I'm not saying all the companies have this position, but generally there has been a debate that I feel has faded a bit in that, oh, it's kind of, it's fair use, right? It's just doing kind of what a human does, and it's ingesting it and sort of quote unquote learning from what it's taken in, and just putting about something original, quote unquote, again, quote unquotes original, based on that, and that's kind of like a fair use argument. And but if you look back on sort of how content has been sort of handled even pre AI, with the distinctions made between what sort of Google does to crawl the internet versus syndication deals in sort of reproducing that wholesale
Mhm.
in various places. Again, AI isn't a perfect analogy to any of these, but I think what you're sort of alluding to is it actually has more in common with the syndication model than the sort of it's just kind of out there and free for anyone to use model. Is that fair to say?
It is because generally, the take, like, historically, with folks like Google, obviously crawling, and providing a pathway to drive traffic, right? That was
Mhm.
kind of the either, the spoken or unspoken or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that was
Yeah.
the value exchange, right? And um, we view this as, kind of this kind of new wave as a net new content discovery opportunity, right? So I think there will be folks that play exclusively in the training data world, and that will apply to media and lots of other industries. And I think it's an important part of the ecosystem. And there will be some good kind of legal discovery around what fair use is or isn't, right? I think there's obviously, that'll be an interesting space to watch. But I do think in general, that the problem that is really interesting to solve is, like, what is the method of compensation for being able to say, I've got this great content from this great brand, and you want to be able to trust it. I think that, I would guess that most of the folks and household name companies in the AI space want to be good actors, and they want to leverage good content, and they want to say that they were, that you were able to trust this answer because it's coming from brands you all know and love.
Mhm.
What hasn't happened yet is figuring out what's the sustainable business model for that. And so where you kind of have these big friction points are, you know um, the cost associated with, tier one brands, and kind of, these wholesale licensing deals that are represented in the media. Our goal was to find a model that says, how do you make that transactional and allow that to happen in chunks, so you actually can support an ecosystem of many more AIs getting access to distribute lots of content from lots of brands, as opposed to, only the big companies get to play in this space because they're the only ones that can afford these big upfront deals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it totally does. I'd like to sort of probe a little bit what that looks like on a granular level on both sides of this. So let's actually start on the opposite end because because I think I pretty much understand sort of the publisher relationship with Dappier. But
Mhm.
then, okay, so if I'm an AI company, big or small, and I want to use content, and whether it's RAG or training or whatever, break that down for me. What happens? They want to access something. Do they get a flag that points them to Dappier? Like, do they come to Dappier first? And then how is that sort of transaction facilitated?
Yeah, so we're looking for maximal discovery at this point, right? So we are providing, storefronts for our customers. We've partnered with other kind of leading data exchanges to drive discovery on behalf of our customers and data models. And then we have our marketplace where essentially any end user, whether it's an individual developer or a large language foundational model, can come to it, effectively grab a RAG API, and then start pulling content, for their use case. They do that on a pay per query basis.
Got it. And it's pretty much self-serve, right? Like you just kind of go in and it's like, oh, this costs this much, and then you decide whether it's worth it to you or not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we're doing it with, we have lots of great partners in the, in the local news verticals. We have lots of partners in sports and lifestyle brands coming online. So we're continuing to scale this in a way that is going to keep bringing interesting content across a variety of verticals into the marketplace. And then, look, I think, there's countless use cases of what AIs, are going to be built, and what kind of agents are going to be developed and want access to content of all types. Can't really predict all those use cases, We can think about what those likely are if we follow kind of the normal pattern of human behavior and what humans are interested in. And so we're partnering with publishers across a variety of verticals to stand those models up and say, look, if you want to be a good actor, here's a way to be a good actor and get my content.
Nice. And it's scalable and self-serve on both sides of this. Is that
Correct.
correct? Like, in other words, there's like one of the things about all these deals with OpenAI obviously sort of made it high levels with big companies and big publishers, which all sounds great if you're big enough to get on their radar. And if you're not, what do you do? And it seems like, the vast majority of people putting out content are probably below that level and are kind of shrugging when they see this and just feel like they're going to get caught up in the winds of this.
Yes, this has to be easy for the middle market to take advantage of, and the tail, right? This
Mhm.
should not be a world where all the value only accrues to the biggest players in the space. And I think that's kind of, having been, building businesses at the intersection of kind of media and emerging technology for the better part of 20 years, right? I mean, I think we see the opportunity to, kind of help publishers of all shapes and sizes take advantage of this marketplace. And that is, and that comes through having a model that makes it easy for them to onboard, and it has to be easy on both sides, right? So this can't be something where, it's a hand-picked deals, or it'll take too long to build.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just doesn't scale
yeah.
100%. So curious, like, what's a typical price for content? How is that even sort of priced out? I guess it's like per query or like, but then it's like, what's the rate?
Yeah,
I guess it largely depends on what the publisher set, but what do they typically set?
yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of price discovery that's happening in the marketplace now. I'll give you an example of one of our, it's kind of a media company and a data company at the same time, a company called Polygon.io, that we partner with, that provides financial market data from leading kind of trusted sources. Their historical business model is to provide an API on a pay per query basis to developers of all types. We simply provide a RAG API on their, on behalf of them, to allow them to access a new customer base. And so there's a well established kind of pay per use model in the world of APIs that support things. And so that's kind of, you can look at how those things are priced and how pricing scales with usage, to
Mm,
guide your thinking. There's also pretty well established syndication business rules, right? So people
right.
understand what their content is worth when it's being seen by third party sites and apps. And so we guide our customers to think about it that way and price that way. Of course, the market will decide. Like, if you have no takers at a certain price point, you probably priced too high, right?
Mm,
Again, we're supporting kind of a lot of price discovery in the early days of this, but generally we think about it at the intersection of those two things. On the one hand, it's, depending on the type of data you have and what existing kind of transactional business you do, there's kind of like one proof point and data point, and on the other side of it is, what does your syndication business look like today, and what are you generating from that business? And so syndication as a phenomenon has become more and more important for media publishers of late, and so there's a
sure.
lot of decent discovery and understanding around what those price points should be.
So I'm curious, like, on the technical side of things,
Mhm.
how um how much of a whack-a-mole game is it against these sort of bots and these scrapers? I feel like a lot of this, I wouldn't, I used to kind of call it the honor system. I don't think that's quite right, but I do think it is kind of an arms race
Yeah,
with regard to, like, you block a crawler, it's fairly easy to spin up another one. And
yeah.
how does that, because I assume, like, well, it's probably gets into how it works in terms of identifying crawlers versus regular traffic, and then which ones are, you want a green light or whatever, and how granular you want to get as a publisher.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, that it's a problem it's a hard problem to solve, and even if you have really advanced kind of bot detection techniques, you've got to also, you have to go beyond that, in my view, and can really encourage good behavior, right? I mean, we are kind of seeing a mass eruption of bots, and kind of bot activity, We think there are, obviously companies out there that have been in the bot detection space for a long time. Our approach is to partner with the best in class companies that focus on specifically that. So we are, as a company, focused on figuring out the monetization and distribution and partnering with best in class companies when it comes to bot detection. We don't really see a lot of value in reinventing the wheel there.
Gotcha. Um, so a lot of what you offer is this sort of monetization in the marketplace, but once the publisher's content is in your platform and has the RAG technology applied to it, they can use it themselves, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, and
Tell me how
that's
that goes.
exactly right. And we think that's a significant, or we hope that that's a significant kind of value add, right? Because there's a lot of infrastructure, upfront investment, both tech, kind of, knowledge investment, both in kind of, knowledge and latest techniques, and then kind of actual technical infrastructure to host and manage RAG, and then of course maintain it, and then finally maintain it across all of the emerging platforms. So
Mhm.
there's a lot ultimately, that goes into this stuff. And I will say that, like, there are kind of really, obvious use cases for publishers where implementing kind of consumer facing AI that drives engagement, and ultimately content discovery will
Right.
ultimately drive revenue. And so we want to support those things on a turnkey basis, and we do make it super super simple to do that. And at the same time, like, I think that the you know um, you know companies that are resourced in order, kind of well enough to be able to invest in some of this stuff themselves. I think a lot of what you hear is, like, you kind of spend the months spinning up some technology, maybe to launch a chatbot on your site, and then you don't, and then kind of you test it. By the time you go through that cycle, right, the market has already moved so much, and the state of the art. I mean, this is kind
Mhm.
of unlike anything else I've seen before in terms of the speed with which the market is moving. And so our general thinking is that there's a lot of value to be tied up in, simply providing a RAG stack for companies to leverage for their own consumer facing efforts. And so we
Right.
provide things on a turnkey basis that just make it easy for them to monetize and test. Frankly, I mean, I think a lot of this is, early days. Like, see what actually works for your users in the context of your audience.
Yeah, super early days, and like I think your point about the rapid advance of this is really well taken. That said, I think there's a bunch of media sites that have experimented with this, and we are just seeing. I just wrote about this the other day on the Washington Post has just come out with their own general chatbot. Now they already had the climate answers, but now
Hmm.
they apparently were confident enough from that to release something a little more broad, going
Hmm.
over their archives from the last 8 years or so. Curious what you're hearing from your customers too on this sort of novel new experience, basically introducing chat on sites. Do most of the your customers see good results from it? I mean, obviously, it's something you're giving to someone who's already on your site. So the measure of success here, to me, seems to be: are you better engaging those folks who are already there? Are you making
Yeah.
customers into more loyal customers through this experience? Are you here? What are your early sort of feedback on chat on media sites?
Oh, I think look, I think it varies, and I think it goes a little bit beyond chat. It has to really, I think there are spaces where it makes a lot of sense, and others where it will just feel like an appendage, right? And so I
Yeah.
think it really depends on the content vertical. The general, 30,000 foot view I have is, look, as the leading consumer platforms are training users to interact this way, we see a
Mhm.
general transition, to people wanting kind of these agent first type experiences. And so we think now is a really good time to learn a lot about what those opportunities are. Um, I will say, like, we did a really fun one. We launched a product called Cat GPT in partnership with Home Life Media, which powers iHeartCats.com,
I
which
love
is a
that.
great, like, kind of pet care brand. And we didn't launch, we launched it as a standalone site. And it was, at the beginning of it, we're like, yeah, this will be a fun marketing stunt, right? And now, we have, tons of users coming to try catgpt.com, doing all sorts of funny things, and also asking for questions about pet care. So I really think that this is an opportunity to learn. We see varied results, right? I think they're, depending on implementations, these are either, they can be wildly successful, and if they're not, if users can't find them, then you can't expect that they will succeed. So we are
Right.
investing a lot in that stack and making sure that fits really well in a turnkey way with what we think will work for most media companies. And we also provide a wide range of APIs so that, look, our publishers will know their customers best. They might have a vision for the future of what works for their brand that it totally differs from what ours is. And so we think they could just build their own thing too. And so we have ideas that we support on a turnkey basis. And then, we say, look, there's also fun stuff you can build on your own. So anyway,
Nice.
I don't know if that answers your question. I would say that it's mixed, it's a mixed bag, and it depends on how much effort you put into it. And there's also obviously natural content types where again, it becomes really natural to ask questions and dig deeper, as opposed to kind of like, passive scrolling,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
behavior.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that right now, like you say, it's so early days. It's a lot of it is kind of a learning exercise on how much your readers want to do this, and then what benefit that is to you as a publisher, what you do with that data, right? So it sort of kind of might help aim your content strategy, but a lot of it depends on the overall experience.
Mhm.
Um, because just leaving it to the platforms like Perplexity and ChatGPT and whoever, you're kind of removing yourself from the game. And I know it's sort of a different thing whether you're on a platform versus your
I
own
think that's
platform.
exactly right.
But another thing that is, I have no doubt, going to be a thing very soon, if it isn't already, is what I very broadly call SEO for chatbots.
Mhm.
I think there's a number of terms going around. People are trying to name this various things. Like I've heard AI EO, like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
and basically AI engine optimization, because the traffic, well, not the traffic, but the idea of being the sort of the primary or one of the primary sources for an AI answer in a broad competitive on the internet sense, that's going to become a thing. And I think the one of the better ways to figure out how those queries are made and how you can answer them is just to simply offer that yourself and
Yeah.
get those insights.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like there's this kind of there was like this hidden industry around this in the world of CTV, right? So you had this concept of TV SEO emerge when
Hmm.
kind of Roku and some of these other platforms were really scaling, and early content partners to those platforms that really understood that have now built really, really healthy businesses on the back of that new distribution channel. I really think about this the same way, right? You had this, think about, um, you know, mobile app stores and apps, TV app stores and apps, AI platforms and AI agents. I mean, to me, that's kind
Hmm.
of like a really similar way to kind of think about the market. Maybe it's just my silly way of doing it because those are the kind of the worlds I played in. But at the same time, I would say that there's this kind of, let's call it AI SEO, which is get your brand mentioned and get share of voice within that space. And then there's the transactional piece of that. Like, how do you then leverage that, if the click isn't happening? And so I think that's really the maybe the most exciting kind of surface area to solve here, which is, look, I want to be mentioned, and I want, my brand to be thought of, whenever someone is asking a question about this, right? Like, so, I got, just kind of give an example. I'm asking a question about, skiing or winter sports. I get this kind of summarized answer from the AI. Then I get pointed to a bunch of publications that helped inform that answer, where I can go and learn more about a ski trip I want to book. And then, last mile is I might click and go to that publisher,
Hmm.
right? That's kind of like, the limit of what the state of the art is today.
Mhm.
And then you want to think about, well, then how do I then transact with that brand? How do I dig deeper into the publication's article, both in that space and then where does a user then shift to consume my content? So I think SEO is a part of it. The transactional piece is a really important part of it. And, your overarching kind of point of, the best way to learn how to play in that space is to dig in and try something is something I
Mhm.
agree with. Yeah.
Nice. So we've talked a lot about chat and these experiences, but getting sort of AI to ingest your content, get some insights, it goes beyond chat, right?
Yeah.
And there's other things you can do with that data that
Mhm.
now that you've essentially applied a large language model to it.
Correct.
How do you help sort of publishers with that sort of things, whether it's recommendations or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, those are things we offer on a turnkey basis. You know, content recirculation recommendation, just part of our kind of offering. It's in what we've seen and tests that performs phenomenally, right? And again, this is part of tapping into both creating a value proposition and tapping into the existing revenue supply chain for publishers, right? I mean that's kind of baseline, content recommendation, search, chat, or some version of chat. I think these are all use cases that are pretty easy to get your head around. I think the other side of it, and maybe equally as exciting, are like what are all the non-chat use cases that
Mm,
AI platforms and agents might have for content, right? So, there are other use cases beyond simply you know information, consumer facing information seeking, where AI agents that want to act on behalf of folks and do things out in the world need access to data in order to do. And I think those are like that's where like you have kind of infinite use cases. And I guess if you had to like if I had to thread the needle through that, I would say if one thing we accomplish is transforming kind of media companies to data businesses, that really
mm.
is a fundamental shift in revenue opportunity for folks that create information, right? And so I think that's like what we get really excited about as well.
That's super interesting. I'd love to dive into that just a tiny bit, just because that's you just kind of got my imagination going. I sort of kind of fall back a little bit on my background as a tech journalist, and I used to do a lot of reviews. And what emerged from that space, of course, was the whole affiliate model
Hmm.
of things. You click on something, you get some revenue. But to sort of go even a layer deeper with AI, and the whole idea of removing friction, cutting out middlemen,
Hmm.
and getting a recommendation based on that through something like Dappier, right? And
Hmm.
then because I think a trick in a lot of these sort of straightforward chat interfaces is that if you are, say, like the wire cutter or whatever, you're going to want not just to surface information but like transactional links, and that's sort of a basic level of
Yep.
that sort of surface level of like, I'm a consumer interacting with a chatbot, I'm clicking on this. But what if it's like, even more frictionless, where it's like it's really like, I just need this information that's getting from the wire cutter, and there's a transaction with, say, your platform in addition to
Exactly.
sort of whatever that is, and maybe the pricing's a little different for something transactional like that. I don't know. Like, you tell me how this works.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's clear, there's the set of opportunities which are consumer facing, and that's like I'm gathering information for myself, probably in support of some purchase decision, right? Like that's kind
Mhm.
of like how the
Sure. How the internet works
the
today.
internet is structured, right? So I'm gathering some information. I want to know that it's like I have this kind of answer that is either synthetic or it's coming from a group of trusted sources. And if it's coming from a group of trusted sources, you need a good way to attribute whatever eventual purchase happens to those sources, and that's kind of a problem area that we're working
Sure.
on, and there's some other companies working on that as well. And then there's kind of like, I'm building an AI agent that's going to make decisions about X, and in order to make those decisions and act on them, whether that's in the context of purchasing something or in the context of understanding something, I still want to know that that's coming from trusted sources, right? I'm going to trust, for instance, a wire cutter, right? As you kind of use your same example, more than I would just trust some synthesized answer. And I would want to know that essentially, like, you know, the content that I'm consuming as an AI agent, right, is coming from a place of trust. And I'm guessing that the whole ecosystem is going to evolve simply around, agents making decisions on behalf of other agents and making sure that that data that is being consumed by them um, is essentially trustworthy. And I
Interesting.
think, I mean,
Yeah.
those use cases, can vary from, research to, hedge funds making decisions to individuals
Right.
using
Yeah.
AI agents to, to kind of, analyze a specific market opportunity, right? Like there's so many different ways to think about how you might want to consume lots of data at once from trusted
Mhm.
sources. It's kind of, it can expand quickly.
Yeah, finance and financial analysis, huge, huge. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of automated stuff built there already, but it's mostly around sort of the raw data, and
And
if
I mean, you can
the
think about
media
use
side of it.
cases
Anyway,
yeah, I mean, you can think about use cases in healthcare, right? You can think about like lots of different
yeah,
places where you would want to quickly synthesize lots of information, or sorry, quickly aggregate lots of information, make sure that it's coming from trusted places. And I think what's exciting about this, right, is like the actual consumption um, can really shift, like, can really shift to the end, like the end. Every user, every one of us, right, a Dan agent versus a Pete agent might want to do very different things. We might go through our day asking all sorts of random questions about lots of topics, but at the end of the day, like, I think for any of the agent to be truly useful, it has to really have access to all data, right? So it
mm,
has to be connected to content from trusted sources, and hopefully it will be actionable data. It won't just be like
yeah,
stuff I can read. It should be stuff I can read and then act on. And that, I think that's pretty exciting. And
nice.
yeah, so yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned some other folks in the space doing similar things. I'd love to ask about your competitors, and I've spoken to a couple of them. So just to throw out some names. There's like Tollbit. There's one called Verify, and they're all kind of in this sort of orbit of trying to solve the problem. Honestly, like
Yeah.
publishers are getting their stuff harvested by AI. Let's figure out a system whereby that can be turned into some sort of fair exchange. So why is Dappier? Why do you think you have a superior product to this other folks? And particularly, well, those that sort of use novel solutions like blockchain and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, our general approach, I think, as kind of mentioned to you, is like we're not focused on, exclusively this scraping problem. We're focused on creating a sustainable business model for media companies, and also democratizing access to data for AI companies of all sizes. So we want to create an ecosystem where it's easy for any individual agent or developer or foundational model to get access to trustworthy content. And we want to remove kind of large paywalls from that,
Mm,
from
right.
that approach. We think that there are great companies that are great at dealing with bots, and lots of them. So we don't really see the need to reinvent the wheel in that side of the world. Um, Fundamentally, I mean, our approach is differentiated because we provide that full stack solution. So we have tools for your O&O, and we have tools that allow you to play in this emerging AI internet. And we've seen, kind of building upon experience from the past, right? Our general thinking is that, like, there are opportunities that publishers can take advantage of today that will actually drive meaningful revenue within their O&O. And then there's an opportunity for what comes next as this market develops and the rules are written. And so, like, our kind of position relative to, I would say, the competitive market is that full stack solution that makes it easy to adopt and tread water, and frankly prioritize whatever you want to prioritize. So if you want to prioritize, owning your audience and keeping the opportunity kind of confined to your O&O and treading water when it comes to AI, we have a stack that supports that. And if you want to test the market and understand what your content is worth to third parties, we support that as well. I think it's important to be comprehensive and also understand how media companies work today. And so, I think, look, there's a lot of work to be done. We think that there's a lot of surface area to cover among the kind of emerging AI ecosystem, as they figure out what works for them and what content they even want. And then there's kind of the world today of publishers and their consumers, and providing kind of a best in class experience to those consumers. And so we want to support kind of that, the discovery of that emerging AI internet, while also being grounded in the reality of where there's an opportunity to drive revenue today.
Nice. So let's end on a future note. Project out 5 years. The internet evolves, AI advances. Dappier is part of this system. What does the AI media ecosystem look like, and what is Dappier doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in general, 5 years, given the advancement rate of some of this stuff is difficult, right? But
Hmm.
I would say that I think we see a general transition from web pages to agents, right? I
Hmm.
think, at the end of the day, like, I think the opportunity for media companies, as it ever was, is to go to where the customer is, as opposed to exclusively thinking about bringing the customer to you. And I think that that's a transition that we'll see and hope to support as it develops, right? So you want a world where we can support media companies and content creators continuing to create that content. And I think there's a transition that happens, which is why we've built the stack the way we built it. So you have audience today. Let's super serve that audience with an incredible experience that enhances it, that drives engagement, drives revenue. And let's think about how the world might play out if we have, AI goggles that we're all wearing and want access to content and want to be able to just say, hey, what's happening today with XYZ, and get an answer and know that that answer is coming from a brand we love and trust and follow. And so, um, yeah, my best guess is that there's a general transition from pages to agents. We view our role as powering that transition for media companies.
Awesome. This has been great, Dan. We'll leave it there. And if people are as intrigued by the things we've talked about as I have been, how can people reach out to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, Dappier.com is a great spot, at Dan Goikhman on Twitter, and I'm all over LinkedIn. So please feel free to reach out. We are having tons and tons of these discussions every day. We learn on every one of them, and we try and educate and pass on whatever we've learned to others, as we all kind of figure this space out.
Perfect. Thank you, sir, for the conversation.
Perfect. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks so much for listening to my conversation with Dan Goikhman of Dappier. If you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Be seeing you in the future.